Hello, today is Wednesday, October 22nd. Welcome to episode 517 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Advisory Board member Lester Munson. I'm joined today by Deputy Executive Director Martha Miller, Senior Fellow Andy Kaiser, and Fellow Jessica Jones. Yes, we are working on promoting her. If folks write in, call in, by popular demand, she really needs to get to be promoted to senior fellow. We're going to talk today about the big meeting on Monday between U.S. President Donald Trump and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. There was at least two big issues discussed. AUKUS, the Australia, United Kingdom, United States deal on nuclear-powered submarines, which was effectively endorsed by President Trump. There had been some concern that he was a little skeptical of that deal. There had been a Department of Defense review, particularly on the issue of submarine production and ship production. The U.S. has been lagging on that a little bit. We're not producing as many ships and submarines as we would like to be, and selling a bunch of them to Australia might, in theory, reduce our ability to produce them for ourselves. But AUKUS got endorsed and strengthened, and Trump says he wants to move it along even a little more quickly than we thought. Also, there was a deal, folks, on critical minerals between the two leaders of Australia and the United States. Let's dig into this a little bit, Andy. The rare earths issue is an issue because China seems to be hoarding its supply of rare earths. China is the world's only producer of them. In other words, if you want to process rare earths, you have to go through China to do that. We can't process them. Australia can't process them. What are your thoughts on this arrangement between the United States and Australia? Is it a good thing?
Yeah, pretty significant development here. The Chinese have done something very interesting with their rare earths. They have sort of copied, mimicked some of our export controls, particularly around technologies, semiconductors, telecommunications, chips, other things, where we've used our tools to, prevent or at least stymie Chinese, particularly military and intelligence services, access to those sort of cutting edge technologies less. And now, though the Chinese, of course, have screamed loudly that those violate all kinds of international norms and are mean-spirited and other things, they've decided to go ahead and copy that playbook with a choke point that they control completely, which is in the rare earth space. And as our smart listeners know, rare earths are key components to everything from the cell phone in your pocket to the F-35 in the sky. So they kind of have us over the barrel on this one. And in fact, this will reach ahead. This is quite if they actually go down this path, I don't know how you say we're hosed in Australian, but we're kind of hosed. So this agreement is good. Australia has a huge reserve of rare earths, but we have a today problem, not a 10-year from now problem. And getting into the ground, getting access to those minerals and getting them to market takes time. So I think a little more, as always with these things, the devil's in the details. How quickly can we get these to market? Because that's where the real crisis is coming to a head this year. Very quickly, more quickly than I think most realize. Less.
Jones, are you also trying to make jokes about Canada on this Australia issue? I mean, I know people get the countries confused, but they're both, Commonwealth countries. They both speak English largely.
Canadians sound like us a little more though. So Australia, I can differentiate the two.
Okay, what are your thoughts about this really important meeting between Trump and Albanese?
Yeah, I think the Australian delegation probably walked away pretty happy, right? They probably want a little more talk about tariffs, which, they wanted a reduction and they didn't get that, but they got, to your point, reassurance on AUKUS and they got this critical minerals deal. The deal maker in chief was out, I guess, on Monday. And so there were probably some smiles. I think to Andy's point about the timeline when it comes to critical minerals, that's the same conversation that can come to this AUKUS nuclear submarine conversation, right? And it plays into the larger conversation we're having here in the U.S. about reindustrialization for national security and what we're manufacturing here at home. You noted that there's a production gap in submarines. It's not just, it's the U.S. build and for AUKUS, it's also across the shipmaking programs that DoD may have. And that, is done to, the reduction in the industrial base and the workforce, like the shipyards, the suppliers, the actual talent, from welders to engineers needed to make these, to produce. It's just, they're limited, and we're now competing for resources across all these shipbuilding programs. And so while, Trump wants to speed up, AUKUS's delivery from 2032 up, 2032 might actually even be ambitious where we are, right? And we just had a conversation where President Trump said, kind of walked back tomahawks. And there's probably a multitude of reasons, but the messaging was, well, we need them here at home. So we can't deplete our own,
for Ukraine, to be
for
clear.
Ukraine. We can't deplete our resources. And when we look to submarines, if there is either, an extension of our timeline of delivery, or perhaps some, reduction in U.S. build for our own capacity, does that become a talking point? Well, we can't actually send our submarines to Australia because we need them here, right? So I'm a little worried that talking point may come up in the future. And agree with everything that, Andy said about critical minerals. Unfortunately, just like this submarine shipbuilding, an agreement now, like the effects are years into the future, right? And there's a critical challenge today when it comes to critical minerals. And so while this is a great start, friendshoring is super important. How does this actually, what impact does it have on the critical mineral challenge we're facing with China today? I'm not sure.
Martha, I thought Donald Trump was a wild man making crazy deals and breaking things and destroying norms and thinking outside the box. AUKUS was started by Joe Biden. The U.S. and Australia have basically the same, almost the exact same national security interests. We seem to have come up with an agreement here that is totally in line with our interests and theirs, and endorses programs developed in the Joe Biden administration. How in the world did this come from Donald Trump's White House?
Actually, the Trump White House, they have actually kept the good things from the Biden administration.
What?
And the Biden administration actually did keep some of the things from the Trump administration, believe it or not.
What? I don't understand.
Isn't that
What is
crazy? Look, I mean, even for all the criticism that President Trump receives for being unpredictable, irrational, et cetera, kudos to him on this deal. This was actually quite important. I think, I feel the same way with, what Jess and Andy had shared. I'm very concerned about the timeline here. This should have been done, during the Biden administration or even the first Trump administration. Here we are where, China is, the world's like main processor of critical minerals. We are far, far behind due to overregulation in our country. And, I think, we're now having to go work with allies to get our hands on resources that actually exist on our territory. So anyway, I think it's not just drill baby drill, but mine baby mine. And, I think with regard to the submarines, it's notable that, these are not, these are conventional weapons on nuclear powered submarines. We're supposed to give Australia or sell Australia 3 to 5 of them. And that would enable Australia to, really handle China on its own to some more extent. So empowering our allies to take care of their own security needs, just like what we are seeing with regard to NATO. So it's actually, there's actually a logic to it that fits in with this larger strategy that he has to enable our allies to, do more for their own defense, but in cooperation with U.S. industry.
Great. So I'll just make the point I was hinting at earlier, which is this is kind of boring. It's important to have this deal with Australia. They are a very close ally and friend. It's great that we're working with them on nuclear powered submarines and on critical minerals and rare earths and all that stuff. It's great that we're collaborating. The fact that we're actually doing it in such a conventional way that even the Biden administration would have done, I think is almost, it's not news to the point where it's kind of news. Like, this is not what we expect from this administration.
Podcast is usually a little more chaotic because
Yeah,
there's something.
Like, where do you find the fault line in this? I will say there are, on some of the details of this deal, it appears that we're doing some smart things like quickening permitting time and encouraging domestic production. That's fine. Setting a minimum floor for prices may be a long-term mistake. Some of these efforts to manipulate the market are not going to play out well in the long run, in my view. On the submarine production issue, there's a very simple solution here, which is to increase the U.S. defense budget and spend more money on buying submarines. We ought to be doing that. Congress ought to be doing that. One of the issues here with Congress being kind of inert during the Trump administration is that it's not asserting itself on stuff like this. It should be. In the long run, that's going to be the answer for a lot of these challenges we see from China. Okay, that's a wrap. Thanks always to Kelly Crowley, Taylor Lane, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us on Friday, October 24 for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. Of course, we're on YouTube. Check out our video there to see what we are all wearing today. We look pretty sharp. And if you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.